This word gets thrown around a lot. We talk about it a lot, marketing. What does it really mean? What's marketing? Where does marketing become sales? Where do all these things kind of cross over each other? It can get a little confusing. It can get a little kind of blurred lines and all this stuff coming in together. So let's separate this stuff into really two things. And what's nice about this is really these are two separate processes that should always be working for you. So I think of it as two congruent processes that they're just two machines always kind of working, right? One feeds the other feeds the next, okay? Marketing. When I talk about marketing, I'm talking about initial outreach for lead generation, okay? Whether that means outreach outbound or something you're pulling people in, right? So Facebook ads where I'm trying to get people to fill out a form to then now have another call to action after that, or maybe they're getting on a phone call, or they're getting a report, they're getting a free this, free that. That's all marketing. Pulling lists, dropping text, cold calling, direct mail, that's all marketing, right? The purpose of all of that stuff is to bring somebody into a tighter form of communication than they were in before. You've never talked to them before, you don't know what the deal is, you're just trying to bring them closer. That needs to be always working that way for lead generation. But there's another component that a lot of people forget about that is more important, if not equally important, okay? And that's what you do with follow-ups, right? What happens if somebody has responded to a text and then you sent them a follow-up text and they stopped responding? Where do they go? What's happening to them the next day, later on that day, next week, next month? Where do they go in your environment? Where do they go in your pipeline? And the reason this is so important and why you have to wrap your head around this is two things. One, the cost to market to one of those versus the other. So the cost to market versus the cost for a follow-up is much different. The conversion is much different. And the process, the verbiage, the frequency, how I'm doing what I'm doing with them is going to change from one to the other, right? In the marketing side, when we've not spoken to anybody before, it's a very light burden. We just want some kind of response. Yes, raise your hand. Just get them to raise their hand. Don't make it more complicated than that. Follow-ups may be different, right? Follow-ups may be a little bit more targeted, depending on whether it's the first follow-up or the 10th, depending on whether you've had communication with them over the phone or just text, or where do they get in the pipeline. That's going to change the follow-up. But you need both things happening consistently, because they feed off of each other. If you're just doing the front end marketing and you're just talking to the initial responses and just the small percentage that initially engaged, there's a lot of people left there that you're not communicating with anymore. Same thing, once they go in and they raise their hand, if you're only talking to them if you call them once, there's a lot of people that now you've done all the hard work of getting them to raise their hand initially, of getting the initial kind of contact point. You've done all that hard work and spent that money to do it, but now there's no follow-up happening down the line. It's one of the biggest misses I see across a lot of operations. So get your follow-up sequences right. If anything, I would say get your processes sorted out so that once they respond to the initial marketing piece, what happens from there is already processed out. You just have to figure out the front end now. That lets you have confidence that these people aren't going to fall through the cracks. You don't want to spend money on leads and just have them fall through the cracks. That's a nightmare for your performance, for your numbers, for your spend, all that kind of stuff. So start to look at that as two different processes. And I'm going to give you a visual that I think will help. And it's the way I've always looked at it, the way I've always kind of considered this entire marketing game that we're trying to do here. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is have as many property owners for what I'm targeting inside of my spider web, right? You get this spider web, it has rings, right? Outside in. The middle of that spider web is a deal happening, somebody that I have a consistent relationship with, or somebody I'm able to do a deal with. The outside of that is somebody who has just said yes, just raised their hand, or said, well, I don't know, what are you thinking? I'd like more info, whatever it is, any kind of reaction at all, they're in the spider web now. Even if they say, no, don't call me again, they're still in a piece of the spider web. I just may have to do something differently to get them to move to the middle. By looking at it this way, now we market for them. Once they hit the outside of our web, now they're in that second process that I'm talking about where we're just doing follow-ups. We're trying to just move them closer to the middle. By looking at it this way, once they're in the web, they're in the web. Now it's just a matter of what message do I need to get in front of them to get the response that I want, or to get them to sell that deal, or to get them to agree to that price, whatever it is. Work on getting them in the web as quickly as possible, as easily as possible, and then make your follow-ups more targeted, more meaningful, more pointed, more specific to their situation, more frequent, right? Somebody who you've already had communication with, you can text more frequently than somebody who you haven't. So all these pieces, as soon as they get in the web, the whole game changes for how I can market to them, how I'm going to communicate, how often, what the probability is that I can get them to move closer inside of the spider web. So again, with the marketing, there's a lot of terms over there. Just look at the two processes. Think about this spider web. Marketing is whatever you got to do to get them into the web. As soon as they're in the web, now it's a follow-up game. Now it's 80% easier to find a deal because you don't have to get that initial response. You've already got that. So focus more energy on the spider web, let the marketing feed that, and then just keep pushing them into the middle. Whether that's 3 months from now, 6 months from now, tomorrow, it doesn't matter. Once they're in the web, they're there for you to keep hitting up with some kind of frequency, some kind of follow-up, something happening in the background until they're ready to make a move. Start to look at it that way. Look at these two congruent processes. If you get these two things working side by side together, you're going to see that machine come together very consistently and just push consistent lead flow out, which will turn into deals over the right period of time.